It's been a while we are following clean architecture in Android and implementing all the layers, data layer, domain, and presentation layer. But we have some difficulty and challenges in Android project. For example, we want to fetch the user location with a service. Where to put this service in the clean architecture? Some questions like this are not always being answered clearly. In this video, I'm going to show you with a live coding an example how to fetch the user data with clean architecture. So stay tuned. So this is the environment. On the right side, you can see the final project, and the application we are going to have is getting the user location and printing it in a list. And as you see here, every 5 seconds, I'm fetching the user location and being added at the bottom of the list. And that will be the final project we're going to have. On the left side, you see the empty project. I am going to implement these application to see how we can fetch the data with clean architecture pattern and implementing all the modules and anything we need to provide the data to our main activity class. And I'm also going to use hilt as a dependency injection to make our code base clean and ready for production. So let's get into the code. First, I am going to update my Gradle files to add some dependencies. What I would need is hilt dependency injection and some other and for location, I would need the play service location and KSP also for hilt. So let's do those first, and then we can start implementing our clean architecture pattern. First, let me update the version catalog with all the required dependency. I just added all at once here. We have the hilt, KSP, play service location, and all being added here. And first, I am going to update the global Gradle file, which contain the plugins and everything for the whole project across different modules. So what I'm going to need in this class is adding 2 plugins, KSP and hilt from the plugin, or let me sync the Gradle to make sure they can be found, and the another one for the hilt. And yeah, that's from the plugins. And let's go into the application, build to the application Gradle file, and here again I need those plugin. And the next thing here, adding hilt dependency and Android compiler, and it need to be used with KSP. Let's sync the project again. So what we have here seems correct. I think I need to build the project first. So I added the required dependency, KSP and hilt, to have our dependency injection set up and being ready to implement the actual classes. Let me first create the modules I would need for applying the clean architecture. The first one, which would be Android library, and I could call that data. And the next one, the domain, again Android library and domain. I will create another module to include my Android specific implementation. For example, I am going to use the service class, and I need the context. Context is part of Android platform. So for that, I would like to keep that separate and not including it into neither domain or data module. And I want to have it as a separate module, and every feature module can reuse that part. So let me create another module and call it platform. And here we can maintain any Android related class, such as a service. Let's connect these modules together. As you know, in clean architecture, domain module is independent, and there should not be any dependency in this domain. Everything should be pure related to the language, nothing else. For example, we can only put our data classes and some interfaces. Like if I show you an example here, it could be user location. And let me create a data class of user location. For example, we want latitude, consider string type, and longitude. Latitude and the parameter would be latitude and the string type, and longitude for the second parameter. And again, the type is string. This is a pure code. It has no dependency to any framework or platform. And the next thing we would need here is an interface. For example, GetUserLocationUseCase. A very typical class for clean architecture, and it will be an interface, and it could have function get location. I'm not really sure about the return type, but we may use flow and having the user location here. Let's see, we may change this later. And this is our domain class, and data class is going to implement this interface and have the all implementation here. For that, I am going to add the dependency of the domain here. This is for the connecting domain module to the data. And let me add the health dependencies as well here. Plugin first KSP and then health. And again, I would need the health dependency here. So the build is successful. What else we need here is, let's just a simple implementation for the get user location use case implementation, and it will implement the interface and add the inject keyword and constructor, and then implement what we need. We will cover this part later. What I'm going to have, injecting these class to make sure it is provided. Data module. Let's create a health module to provide the use case. So to create a health module, first we need to annotate this with a module and using install in and set it as a singleton component. So here we can have our provider function provide get user location use case, and so the return type would be user location, and create an instance of get user location implementation. That would help us to use the get user location use case. Let me quickly create the ViewModel class and having everything ready, but doing the implementation a little bit later. Create a main ViewModel here, and it will be a health ViewModel, again using inject keyword to inject the ViewModel and constructor. So we want to use this use case, which is get user location use case. It will be fixed when I add the domain dependency to the app module. Let me finish this part here, and now we can go to the Gradle file, add another implementation to add the module dependency, which is domain. Sync the project, go back to the main view model. So let me see. Okay, I think I had a typo. And here we can just use the use case class and provide the data to the main activity. And here what we would need, like view model, let's use Android X extension function main view model. Yeah, and if we want to have any state, we can define it here. It would be like that. Let's use delegate view model dot state dot collect blah blah blah. We'll fix this later. What else? Let's get back to the implementation and cover this part. Before that, since we are going to use user location, we would need some permission we need to add. Let's do that part first to make sure everything is covered and our application won't crash. I'm just going to quickly update the manifest to add the permissions, the runtime permissions, and then do them and implement the runtime permission in code, and then we're good. So I already created 2 class. I'm just going to walk you through to the implementation. So I just created 2 class. So I just added 2 class related to runtime permission. First, I created sealed class, which could be a sealed interface. And where was that? Let me fix this part. And providing these from the permission handler. The permission handler is another class which accepts the context to handle anything related to the runtime permission. First, it checks the permission status, and we pass the activity and the list of permissions, and it all the job for us. I just put it here to make the activity class a little bit more cleaner, and this function to open the settings to let user grant the permission for us. I will use this class later in the main activity, but first I would need to provide that class since I'm going to use dependency injection. Like if I could create another module here, again we need to define a module annotation and install in, let's do it, singleton component and provide that. So what we need is first provide the context. Actually we don't need, I think this will do this for us. And what we need here is implementing a provide function and singleton from provide permission handler. And actually we don't need that. So we have this class here. We just need to use this class in our activity by simply using inject annotation and letting it where permission handler. And yeah, that's it. Let me add the Android entry point here and create an application class and annotate it with hit Android application with application and set it in manifest. Yep, that would be it, I think. And at the beginning of this class we need to here make sure to check the permission first. Let's pass this main activity and list of permission here. This would be a list of permission we would need. I just copied here to do it a bit quicker. So we can't simply check the permission here in Compose. We need to do it a little bit differently. First, I'm going to define a variable to get the permission state. So using a state function in Compose, and the type would be permission state, and it is nullable. And import all the delegate extension function and implement a permission launcher. Since it's something need to be done differently in Compose, I create a permission launcher here. So that's what we need for the contract, which is pretty fine. And update the permission state with permission handler dot check permission, and this what we had a little bit earlier, and adding the permissions. And for the first time we want to check the permission, and for that we need to use launch effect and passing unit, because we need to have it executed only once. Set the initial state, again check the permission and this. So here we need to check if the initial state was granted. Just if the initial state was granted, set the permission state to granted. Otherwise we need to launch the permission to be granted and passing the permissions. That would be something we need for the first time. And we need to have another side effect, which in this case would be a disposable effect. We want to have this check when user went to a setting and came back, and to make sure the permissions are granted when they return from the setting activity. And for that I am going to use disposable effect, and the key would be the life cycle, because I need to check based on life cycle, and defining a life cycle which is life cycle event observer, and it has 2 types, the life cycle owner and the life cycle event. And here I'm going to check what kind of life cycle we have. If the lifecycle event is lifecycle.event.onResume. Then we are going to update the permission by checking the permission again. And yeah, what we are going to do here is just adding these observer to our lifecycle, and at the end, as you know, we need to implement the dispose callback to remove the observer. Yeah, that's the good thing about disposable effect. Let us to clear some resources. So that was what we needed for handling the permission. So what I'm going to do to handle this permission in the UI is adding a when condition here, permission state, and checking all the cases and implementing the UI based on that. I just quickly did the denied case. I created a compose function, added a column. On top, there's a text which says location permission is required, and a button to relaunch the permission launcher. That's quite simple. Let's cover the other cases. So the other case would be when it's permanently denied. And in this case, we want to open the setting. That's all we can do. And for the null case, it will be a loading, I would expect. So what I'm going to do is just adding a circular progress indicator to show a loading for our user. And the grant section. That's the main thing we are going to work and about the ViewModel and everything, because it requires the permission. We have to use that only when it's granted, and our job will begin from here. So for the sake of time, I quickly added the location screen. I'm going to walk you through. I passed the modifier and the list of user location, and here I check with the launch effect if the size change, update the position. And if you can see here, every 5 seconds it's update and scroll to the bottom of the list. And we have this graphical and the padding, everything is added. I added the lazy column and the items, and that's pretty much simple. And the location item showing all the data related to the user location. And yes, that's pretty much it, and it's nothing too crazy. I just wanted to show you the grant state where we get the permission and we want to show the user location. So what we would need here is first a modifier, which is a modifier with a padding of inner padding from the scaffold layout and the locations. It will be, let me just do that and add a to-do. I will add this when I provided the user locations. So let's look at the ViewModel class and provide the user locations from here, and then we go into the user location use case to see the implementation. First, I would need a mutable state flow to keep the user location. It will be a private state. So in the ViewModel class, I need to fetch the data, user location data from the use case. What I need here is a mutable state to contain the user locations. First, I create a state with a mutable state flow, and the type would be a list of user location. And the default value is an empty list. And then expose the state with as a state flow, and where we want to update this state is within the init function, where I'm going to call the use case dot get location dot collect. Since it's a suspend function, I need to use ViewModel scope and the launch to get the latest location. So what I'm going to do here is update the state, which is a new list. I'm going to define a new list here, which would be getting the current value and changing it to the mutable list, and new list add the new item. And that will help us to update the state and showing it in the UI. So let's quickly get back to the UI, and here I just get the data from ViewModel.state collect as a state with lifecycle. Let's remove these to do, and here UI state will contain all the locations. Actually, I can just change this. bit easier to read. Okay, let's go back to the implementation in our data class, where the most important implementation in this example is going to happen. So what we need here is a service location. So to be able to fetch the user location, I go into the platform module and will implement the class I need to fetch the user location. Let me create a new class and I would call it location data source. Within this class, I want to use ViewLocation client, which will be a private variable. Nope, not this one. ViewLocation client, and I think I need to add the dependency here, but I'm going to use location service. Let me quickly go to the Gradle file and add the dependency. In the updated Gradle file, I added the domain since I needed to the data class, and healed to provide these location data source and implement, and also adding the play services location to be able to make use of this location service. And in this case, I'm going to use ViewLocation provider, but it needs a context. So since I'm using healed, I can easily add this dependency to our constructor and add a application context. That would be the requirement. We can resolve this way. So, and what I'm going to do here is implementing a function called GetUserLocationUseCase, and what it gives us is a flow and a type of user location. Let's use the callback flow to make use of this API because we want to periodically get the user location, for example, every 5 seconds. Let's create a request, location request, and it will be location request builder. So what it need is a priority, which is high, and the period, and every 5 seconds we want to get the location and call the build function. So I just updated the location request to be the right import file, and it fixed the error. So the next thing is creating a callback, and the callback, it would be a location callback. It's just an anonymous interface. So the implementation here is on location results. So what we are going to do with the location callback is getting the last location, which is parameter dot last location, sending it to our flow. Yep, like that. Let's see what is the issue. Okay, since it's a nullable parameter, we need to make sure if it's not null. So now we have this callback, and we are getting the location by calling by this last location function, and we want to just send this back. So let's call try send, and we want to send a user location. The user location need these parameters. Let me add a variable here, which is a latest location, and just fill the data from the latest location. So since the type is long, we need to convert it to string, and this is a nullable parameter. I use let function to make it a bit simpler and handle the null case as well. Yes, this way we send the user location back to the upper level, and yeah, I think it did the job. What I would need to do here is remove the callback first. Let's use await close and ViewLocation client to remove updates and pass the callback. There is one thing else we need to do is requesting for the updates. So first use the ViewLocation client dot request update, and in this function we have to pass our request we created earlier and the callback, and the last one is a looper. We want to use a main thread for that. Looper dot get main. So since it need the permission, we have to add a suppress here to fix this error, since we already implemented the runtime permissions. And let me add a failure case. If this happen, I want to close this stream. That's it. I think that's what I would need for retrieving the user location. I'm just going to use this in my use case class. So let me add the dependency of the platform into the data layer. So this way I have access to location data source, and yeah, directly we can return the prompter. Since there's no complex logic in this case, we want to keep it simple. But that was the point here. Using platform data source here is using context and location service and all this stuff, and we brought that dependency into our data module. Since these are connected to each other, we want to provide some kind of data, and this data can be organized in this way, creating a platform function and adding a dependency to the data layer. And using these interface, it could be a repository or use case. I just wanted to keep it simple and created these use case where you want to use these use case, for example, in the ViewModel class, and populate data to your UI. So I think the last thing is left is updating the provider class and adding the dependency, which is the location data. Let me directly put this in our function and add it to constructor. So I think we've done the job, and you see the relationship between the modules and the platform module I created, how it's being used in the data module, and providing the data into our UI layer, which is the main ViewModel class, and the ViewModel class use this state to populate the locations into our UI. That was all. I wanted to show you where to put any platform specific into a clean architecture pattern. It's not anything special. It's more related to how you organize your code base, and creating a new module. It helps you keep the code base clean, and it follow the clean architecture pattern and not interfering with any other basic structure in your project. So I am going to run the project to see how is the implementation. As you see here, it is the runtime permissions I'm going to grant in the progress bar, and we expect to see the user locations every 5 seconds. The behavior, it works fine, but what was important in this example, I was going to show you how to connect any platform related data, like here location service. As you see, everything's here related to platform, play service, and how to provide these data to your UI layer when you're using clean architecture. Hope you enjoyed this video.